We're now on to topic 6, and this is taking you through poverty. We're going to start by looking at causes of poverty in Elizabethan England, and there are a fair few things that contribute towards this. Firstly, we've got the population increase, with the population growing from 3 to 4 million in Elizabeth's era. London is the fastest growing city, with a population of 150,000 by 1603, and rural depopulation meant that the urban poor grew. What on earth does that mean? Well, it means that as people leave the villages and they move to these bigger towns looking for better work, there are more people in these towns, known as the urban poor, who are out of work, and we know that out of work people are known as vagrants. As people start to live in this way, where they're moving out of the smaller villages and into the towns, they know each other less, and people are very suspicious of vagrancy. Why is this a cause of poverty then? Well, if you've got a bigger population, you've got more mouths to feed. The price of food is pushed up because there is competition for food. Poor harvests mean that the food that has grown is expensive, and inflation has pushed rents up. This means people are already spending lots of money on their homes, their accommodation. There is just not that much money to go around. Next, we have the idea of enclosure. So, the printing press was an invention that meant it was far easier to print books. It made the printing much faster and much cheaper. And one of the things this did was spread ideas about farming. So, farmers started to read books about how to use their land a bit more efficiently to make more profit. And this gave them hints on how to treat soil and livestock. So fields were enclosed by hedges or walls, and this was a cause of poverty because this may have previously been common land where people might have been allowed to graze a few livestock or plant a few of their own crops. So this land is taken away from them. Some fields are enclosed for breeding of certain animals as well, which is another thing that takes this bit of land away from people. And enclosed fields are easier to drain and manage fertiliser. So this idea spread. It used to be that if you had two fields, you'd have to leave one fallow every year to allow the soil to repair so that it would be fertile to grow your crops next year. If you leave a field fallow, it's not a very efficient way of farming. So this idea spread that you could irrigate the land and you could use that field the next year. Those who relied on subsistence farming, where they were just farming to make enough to feed their families, find themselves in poverty with this land now enclosed. They couldn't access it. Also, with these new techniques, you need fewer farm labourers, so this meant higher unemployment. This also leads to higher rates of vagrancy as people then leave these rural areas with these enclosed fields and they look for work elsewhere. So there's more visible vagrants out on the roads. Finally, we have sheep farming in this section, and this one's very important for causing poverty in England. Wool is very important to England and it makes 81.6% of England's exports. It's normally sent to places like Antwerp, the Netherlands, and they process it into the cloth and it makes us both very rich. So sheep farming becomes more popular because more farmers are attracted to the idea of making bigger profits. Flocks of sheep could contain over 2,000 and they take up lots more land. This means that fields that previously might have been used for arable farming, so growing crops, have been turned over to sheep farming now. So sheep take up land that had once been used for growing crops. This means that there is less food because you're now putting sheep on that land. Sheep farming didn't need as many farm labourers, so we've got higher rates of unemployment, and there is quite a lot of upset as sometimes crops are grown purely to feed the sheep when people in England are quite hungry, so this causes quite a bit of tension. Next, we have the inflation of prices. So, new techniques about farming are not always followed, and this can lead to successions of poor harvests, which means that food that has grown is going to be very expensive. Landlords are also charging higher rents on their land at this time and entry fees if you want to take over a field and start farming. This leads to poverty as many farmers cannot keep up with the price of food and the price of rent. Living on land and buying enough food for the family was becoming harder for your poorest in England. We also have falling wages with the Statute of Artificers set in 1563. This meant that there was a maximum daily wage, and it makes people struggle as the price of rents and food go up, but their wages are not meeting this. This means that they don't have enough to buy their day-to-day things, and we know that people are spending about 80% of their income on bread. As we get more workers, because we've got a higher population, this means there's competition for jobs, so employers can pay less because so many people want the job. There is an economic recession when we have tensions with Spain and embargoes with Spain. So, for example, for 1 year, Philip banned the cloth trade with England, which caused high rates of vagrancy as many people rely on the cloth trade in England. Finally, we've got some religious change. Now, strictly speaking, this is outside of Elizabeth's time frame, but you just need to understand this because it impacts Elizabeth herself. Her father, Henry, had closed down all of the monasteries with the dissolution of the monasteries. Now, the monasteries were a place where you could go and get help if you were very desperate, and someone like a monk or an abbot would assist you in your time of need. So if you're sick or poor, a traveller, you could go and get help from the monasteries. As Henry had destroyed these, there was now nowhere for people to go and get help. There was nothing like the NHS, there are no sort of social benefits really, so people relied on that Christian charity, which had now been smashed to nothing. Because we have no monasteries and no sort of charity to help people, this means that we have a rise in unemployment and a rise in vagrants. Next, then, we have the changing attitudes towards the poor. So, who are the poor in Elizabethan England? Well, they are mostly younger people or single women or widowed women who have lost a husband. Vagrancy is always a problem when we are at war with Spain or if there is conflict in the Netherlands because it damages trade and we heavily rely on the wool trade, wool and cloth. We've got no monasteries, as previously mentioned, and also there is a big fear of vagrancy and vagabonds, as with the printing press, we have pamphlets circulating which cause deep suspicion amongst the people. We have the deserving poor on the one hand, those who might be physically unable to work. It might be due to a disability of some sort or perhaps age, and they were seen as deserving of charitable help. On the other side, we've got the idle poor who are seen as lazy people who could work but didn't. They chose to beg instead because they could earn more money doing this, and they might even use tricks to earn some money. They were punished quite harshly though if they were caught with whipping or maybe being sent to a house of correction. And once again, it's worth mentioning that when we've got a downturn in the cloth trade, lots more able-bodied people become seen as idle poor, visible on the town's streets. So how do the Elizabethans help? Is there a change in attitude towards the poor at this time? Well, we still have this idea of the Christian duty hanging around here, and although monasteries are no longer a thing, wealthy people did have this sense that they needed to donate to help. We then have some more official channels here. So the Statute of Artificers in 1563 worked to keep wages down. They didn't want people asking for more money. This set a maximum daily wage and restricted the workers from maybe leaving one village to go to another to look for higher paid work. At this time, the justices of the peace collected the poor relief, but this was not standard from village to village or town to town. This all changes with the Vagabond Act of 1572, and this is where the poor rate, which is a kind of like a charity tax, I suppose, that goes towards vagrancy, it's changed because it's no longer local and to be decided by local justices of the peace, but it's nationally set for the first time. So it's arranged by the government rather than just the church. Justices of the peace keep a register of who is poor, and it works to try and find them employment. It also established punishment, so vagrants would be whipped in a hole drilled through each ear as a mark of shame and a deterrent to others. If they are caught a third time, then it is the death penalty. So on the one hand, there is recognition that work needs to be found for them. They are poor because they are unemployed. But on the other side, we've got some quite harsh punishments here. Although it's worth recognising here that justices of the peace were quite sympathetic to vagrants. Next, we have the Poor Relief Act of 1576, and this is the one that gives us those two terms, idle and those that are deserving. So it distinguishes between the two. Justices of the peace had to give vagrants wool or other raw materials in order that they could do something with these, make something to sell, so they are therefore finding them employment. Those who refuse, again, they've got a harsh punishment, they're sent to a house of correction. So the big change here is that the Elizabethans recognise that there is a problem with unemployment and that is leading to vagrancy. It's not just a criminal behaviour, but also punishments are still quite harsh.